Hello everybody, my name is Joe and I am the student ministry lead here at the Chapel Norwalk campus, and I'll tell you what, I miss you all so much. I cannot wait until we are back in person in church together, but until then we are here wrapping up our final message of the LoveHate series, and it's very appropriate that we're ending this series as we are ending 180. And a little bit more about that next week. So let's wrap up this week's message. But before we do, let me pray for our time together. God, we come to you, Lord, with the natural inclination to not always, if ever, to put love in the blank when we assume things about other people. And so, Lord, I pray that your word would saturate our hearts and our minds and help us to become more like you in the way that we see other people. We thank you for your word, for this time, in your name. Amen. All right, well, let's get into this. So here's what I want to start off with. Now, you may not know this, or maybe you do, but companies spend billions of dollars each year trying to control their brand's reputation. The look or the smell of the thing that they're known for, those aren't accidents. Those types of things are carefully decided. Here's what I mean. I'm going to read you a reputation about a company or a brand, and you just see if you can figure out, based upon their reputation, if you can figure out what that brand or organization or company is. All right? This company sells everything, and they offer 2-day shipping. All right, that's number one. Second one is the lowest prices, always. All right? The next one, and maybe this is an argument, it's not for me, the best cell phones. All right, the best cell phones. We all know that it's Apple. All right, the next one is free streaming music. Green logo, black screen. And the last one, which we all know, the world's best chicken sandwich, and it's always their pleasure to serve you. Now, you may have guessed what those were just based upon their reputation. And here's the point. Companies spend hundreds of billions of dollars and they hire hundreds of people to try to shape something that every one of us probably spends very little time thinking about for ourselves. What is that? Well, it's our reputation, right? Our reputation, those are made up of all sorts of things, and they bring out all kinds of assumptions about who we are as people. I mean, just think about the various groups in your school and the assumptions that you've made about people who are a part of those groups. You might think like, okay, well, every rich kid is blank. The robotics kids are blank. The AP honors students are blank. The football cheerleaders are blank. The people that are really into band are blank. The kids who vape are blank, right? And even though we don't say those things out loud, or at least we shouldn't, we all tend to fill in the blanks about other people. Whether we know the person or not doesn't really matter. We know their reputation, or we build one for them in our minds based upon their previous actions or the actions of one person in their group. And this isn't a teenager thing. This is a human thing. We all do this, right? Well, where did those assumptions come from? Well, I think they come from a lot of places, but a couple of the following stand out the most. One is experiences. We have experienced someone like them, what they did to us or said to us, and we carry those experiences into other people and judge those other people based upon our previous experiences. The second one is this: it's insecurities. Sometimes sometimes our assumptions are formed based from our insecurities. The person that we're filling a blank about has something that we want or something that we wish we had. They have the starting position on the team or the house that our family could never afford, and it's so annoying, right? And so we automatically assume the worst about that person because they remind us of how far we feel from being the best. Because it's so easy to bring another person down than to try to raise ourselves up. And so our limited experiences and our insecurities cause us to fill in the blanks and convince ourselves that we know way more about somebody than we actually do. And it can be a problem if we, as followers of Jesus, really want to be known for love rather than for hate. Because often, to be honest, we don't fill in the blank with something nice, right? We usually don't assume the best in people. We oftentimes assume the worst. And the ironic part is that we hate it when people do that to us, right? But how do we resist the temptation to do that same thing to other people? Well, there's an account from Jesus' life that I think speaks directly to this, and I think that we can help it. You see, Jesus was in the middle of a tense encounter with some of the religious leaders in Israel at the time. These teachers of the law and Pharisees was what they were called. They were a big deal in religious circles. And when I say religious circles, their culture was far more religious than our culture, so they were a big deal in all circles. Religious, social, political, financial, they were a big deal. And they had a reputation of self-righteousness that they thought set them apart from everybody else. You know, the Pharisees were the type of people that if you looked at them, you'd say, wow, if anybody's going to go to heaven, they're going to go to heaven because they do everything right. Well, so when Jesus came around, and now he starts spending time with people, the religious leaders who had branded as sinners, or people who weren't as close to God, things got really tense. So they start trying to catch Jesus off guard with questions that they were hoping would prove that he was a phony. They wanted to slip him up and answer something in a way that took away his credibility and made him look bad. In the accounts of Jesus' life, almost always when the Pharisees are asking Jesus questions, they don't really want to know the answers. They're just trying to trick him. And so during one of these encounters, after some people had gathered to listen to Jesus teach in the temple, the religious leaders caught a woman in an R-rated situation. And so they dragged her in front of Jesus to see how he would handle the punishment. And I think what unfolds here shows us a different way to live instead of filling in the blanks negatively when it comes to people's reputations. Check this out. So, as he was speaking, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. So don't miss this. The text says that the woman had been caught in the act. She was literally committing adultery when they caught her. And so we can assume that she's already humiliated. And the law demanded that people responded by literally throwing rocks at her until she was dead. And so the religious leaders wanted to make Jesus choose in front of a crowd of people. You know, was he going to overlook this woman's obvious sin and ignore the law of Moses, the Old Testament law, which would take away Jesus' credibility as a teacher and anger all of the religious leaders? Or would he allow her to be stoned, causing the crowd to turn on him? It was a trap. The leaders knew it was a trap, and that was the point. That was the point. And Jesus knew it was a trap. And so look what happens next. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, "All right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I. Go and sin no more." Now, I'm not sure if we can fully understand the tension of this moment. These religious leaders who built their brand on appearing better than other people and pointing out the sins of others, who were very powerful people, were put in their place. Basically, Jesus is saying, you're quick to point out what everyone else has gotten wrong, but what about you? Have you ever gotten it wrong? Have you ever sinned? And then one by one, they realized that their plan had backfired. And so Jesus kindly and lovingly releases the woman who is literally afraid for her life and tells her to go in freedom and to live her life differently. Can you imagine that? I mean, don't miss this. Everyone here in this situation was guilty of something, both the religious leaders and this woman, and Jesus had a message for both of them. What is possible for your future isn't determined by your past. Not if you're a Pharisee, and not if you're an adulterous woman. Both are guilty, and both are free to go. Both had a reputation for being a certain way, and both can choose to leave differently than they arrived. Jesus challenged the woman to change by saying, "Go and sin no more." Because no matter her reputation, he knew that change was possible for her. This was such a Jesus move, right? He changed everything because he responded in love to everyone in the situation. And that's exactly what you and I, as followers of Jesus, should be about as well. But isn't it true that we often like to be more like the religious leaders, right? Don't we often fill in the blanks about other people based on their behavior even one time? Don't we tend to assume we already know what's going to happen next in their story because of what has happened before or what we think that they might have done? But Jesus' approach to the situation in the story teaches us something different. The woman who had a brand, she had a reputation for being bad, who everyone judged based upon the things that she had done, Jesus saw her as more than this. He knew something was possible in her future, no matter her past, even though he knew everything about her past. He saw her as a whole person. And as a whole person, he saw her as being deserving of another chance. And so in this, Jesus proved that we are more than the assumptions or the judgments that other people make of us, and that we are worthy of forgiveness. We are worthy of grace and a second chance because of his love for us. And we can extend the same forgiveness and grace and love to others too. I mean, think about this. What if this was the approach that you and I started to take when we formed our opinions of people? What if instead of filling in the blanks with assumptions and judgments, we chose to believe that anyone could be radically changed? Because the very first time I came into this chapel, into this church, people could have made a lot of assumptions about who I was. And those assumptions probably would have been true based upon my past and who I was at the time. But it's been 12 years, and Jesus has radically changed my life. And the people at this church didn't see who I had been. They saw who Jesus could make me to be. And what if we believed that Jesus could surprise us and he could change people to be far better than we ever think that they could be? Because I'm living, walking proof of that. You know, basically it's this. What if we chose to let love fill in that blank? And this would change a lot about the way that we think about and the way that we treat other people, wouldn't it? There's something both encouraging and humbling to Jesus' approach because it puts us all on the same level as people who God loves and people who Jesus died to forgive and set free. That we are not the sum total of our actions. And we can see other people the same way. So when opportunities for assumptions and judgments start flying at you, I want you to take these steps towards a new approach. Here's what I want you to do. First, stop and think about how others have filled in the blanks about you. When you assume something about someone, about how they are, or what they do, or what they're about, I want you to stop. Stop and think about your own life. How have people underestimated you? How have they judged you? How have you experienced the other side of someone filling in that blank for you? Because remember, Jesus' forgiveness brought you, if you are a Christ follower, Jesus' forgiveness brought you to a place where your life has started to change for the better. Then you treat other people the way that Jesus has treated you, with grace and love, assuming their best days can still be ahead of them. And the second thing I want you to do is to think about how you've wrongly filled in the blanks for somebody else before. Who is someone that you think you know, but you really don't know? Or someone you thought you knew, but it turned out that you were wrong? Where have you filled out the blanks for someone else in a negative way without learning the whole story about them? Because here's the problem. We can only see what we can see. You oftentimes see the worst in people without knowing what led them up to that point. You may see somebody have a bad attitude towards you, but you don't know the day that they've had, right? And so what if you chose to fill in the blanks about them with Jesus' brand of compassion? Okay, here's where it gets a little personal. Everybody does this, right? Everybody makes assumptions about other people, and oftentimes negative assumptions. We all need to ease up on the assumptions and judgments. But when it comes to church people, when it comes to those of you who would claim to be a Christian, a Jesus follower, getting this right is so important. Because maybe you tend to assume when you see other people, when church is together in the building, and a student walks in and you think, oh, they don't belong here. Or maybe you think, I don't belong here. Maybe you think that, man, that person's never going to change. Or people like that, or people like me, they always blank, and you could fill it in with a million different things. But here's the thing, friends. Statements like those, as easy as they are to make, take the Christ out of Christianity. There's no Jesus in those statements, and so they have no place here among us. Jesus made it so clear with the woman, with the Pharisees, and with nearly everyone he met that love never fills the blank with never. There's always hope for change. And so when we choose to follow Jesus' example and take these steps, we're choosing to let love fill in the blank instead of our quick or shallow assumptions and judgments about who they are now and who they can be in the future. I mean, just imagine with me for a second, what would happen if this is how we spent our time forming opinions on those around us? Instead of assumptions, instead of stereotypes, instead of preconceived notions based on part of a person, what if we believe that everyone is worthy of love and that they have hope for a great future? And even though you might believe that they won't ever change, you believe that Jesus can change anybody. If this is really what Jesus is about, doesn't it cause you to be a little bit more interested in who he is? Because we can let love fill in the blank about other people. And when we do this, we will be known as people who are known for our love for others. Just like Jesus was, and just like Jesus intended us to be. Because here's the situation. In the world that we live in right now, today, in 2020, as crazy of a year as it's been, it is so easy to make assumptions about people. It's so easy to make assumptions about people based upon what they protest, what they don't protest, what they believe, what they don't believe, what they believe about politics, what they post on social media, what they believe about race, what they believe about racism, what they believe about other people who are different from them. That is so easy, and it's rampant in our world right now. But I'm pleading with you as students, followers of Jesus, that we are not called to live like that. That Jesus has loved us so that we can love other people. And instead of making assumptions about other people, which only lead to hate and to violence and to oppression, that we can fill in the blank with love. Because when you see other people, all you can see is what you can see, and you don't know the whole story. So in this time, when it's more critical than ever, let us, as followers of Jesus, fill that blank with love.